What's up everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So one of my audience members asked me a question and said, seriously, break it down for me. Are you really excited about Gotham Knights, or are you just willing to play the game? And I'm sure I've answered this question many times, but there was a video I wanted to make with some comparisons, and so I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to actually make that video in context of this question. So I replied and said, my take is I'm just willing to play the game, and I'm not necessarily somebody that shows excitement a lot. And so yes, I have a little bit of hype for the game, but it's not as much as, say, maybe another video game that I'm looking forward to, like Jedi Survivor, Wonder Woman, and even possibly some aspects of the Suicide Squad game in terms of story. I don't know exactly how that project is going to turn out. And, you know, as much as I like Rocksteady, they're my top development studio in terms of mechanics and all, I still don't think that, you know, they're independent enough to steer clear of these trends that are going on out there in gaming. Now, why would I say so? Why is my take, or at least my own perception on Gotham Knights, quite neutral? In my opinion, there's an appreciation for the game. It's a game in the Batman universe. It's a game that's being made by a set of developers that seem very sincere in their craft. They are a developer underneath a publisher, so I kind of take it easy with them. If they were maybe, say, a developer publisher type, thing, like, say, Rockstar, who, yes, they probably have other studios that work with them, but at the end of the day, they're a publisher style studio in a sense, then yes, you got to understand that relationship, how it kind of works. Another thing too is, when you take into account how these studios are structured, they're more corporately owned, unlike, say, Gearbox, in a sense, where you have Gearbox working together with 2K for publishing, but Gearbox has an owner or someone who's in charge that is almost in the ranks that can make a lot of decisions for the way that studio is going to go. So you got to look at these hierarchies and say, okay, this is how I think I will measure my critique, because at the end of the day, there is something to be said about things like this. And the reason I brought out even Borderlands, I don't know if you guys know, I don't remember, Randy or something, his name in Borderlands, he was supposed to have given or, split some profits with the devs and then ended up not doing it for some game at some time. So that different structure kind of tells me that rather than critique the developers, I can actually critique that person in charge, because the leadership, in a sense, is weird. In the sense of Gotham Knights, I say this because I think they wanted to make their own game. I respect that. But at the end of the day, I think they put aside a winning formula, and they did not take into account, or at least the publisher, whoever was in charge of mandating the game the way it is, did not take into account that there's an audience that already had been won based on the so-called winning formula. And what is this winning formula? When you make a superhero game, there are elements that seem to appeal to the broader audience. These elements were not written in a book somewhere. They were actually discovered. And this discovery was made by Rocksteady. You see, back in the day when Arkham Knight was coming out, there was a Reddit post, and I've referred to this Reddit post over and over again. And somebody asked Stephen Hill and said, what is it that, how did you guys come all the way from making some shooter game? They actually made a Riot response or something like that to making one of the best video games of all time, best superhero video games of all time. And, what he said was, we didn't know that Arkham Asylum was actually going to be a big hit. Actually, we were prototyping the game for two representatives at Warner Brothers, and then before you know, one of them went and got somebody else, the other one went and got somebody else, and by the time the prototype was getting played, there were 50 people already crammed into a small room just watching this prototype of a game. That's when they knew we have something on ground. You see 50 people that are looking at something that they've basically never seen before. You look at their reactions, you as the creative director, maybe you shake hands afterwards after the demo was done, and they tell you, man, this is a solid game, the way this happened, and they give you feedback right there, raw discovery going on. That was the winning formula. And they took that winning formula, they made another video game, Arkham City, the best superhero single player game that has ever graced this earth. I know somebody's going to say Spider-Man. So what I did was I actually showed you how Spider-Man used some aspects of that winning formula, especially in combat. You see, because many people will say Spider-Man had this photorealistic, frame and all of that stuff. But the reality is, even the developers at Insomniac, they looked around, and Insomniac is a freaking amazing development studio. This is not a studio that's lacking in terms of how to execute. They know how to execute, but even they looked and said, if we're going to make a remarkable video game, how are we going to go about it? And they took the blueprints from this winning formula. And so I've been studying this formula and looking at how some video games get it right and some others don't necessarily get it right. Because scale and magnitude is one thing. You want to make these big open worlds, all of that stuff. It's great. I love big open world games, but you don't have to do it all the time. You can actually do good stories and all of the above. Look at the new God of War. The new God of War is executing also in that, paradigm, using some aspects of this winning formula where a game needs for you to have a compelling narrative, a compelling set of encounters, and some things that are core to your superhero. You can make it an RPG game. You can make it an action adventure game. You can make it a shooter. And if it's good, players are going to enjoy those things. So when I look at Marvel Spider-Man and I look at some of the aspects of the game, I laugh and I'm just like, this is insane. I cannot believe that there are elements from the Arkham games that you even find in games as late as Miles Morales and even as early as the Marvel Spider-Man game that came out in 2018, because this formula was actually pretty good. Now, Gotham Knights has adopted another formula that, in a sense, is or seemingly is a winning formula. And I'm not saying this is the developers that, decided to do this 100%. They may have been in a position where, I don't know if you've heard the joke that sometimes, and this is a joke that goes on among developers. I follow a lot of developers on Twitter and just read what they say. There's a joke that goes around saying that sometimes publishers will write, their description of a game on a napkin and hand it to a creative director. They want a specific kind of game because in their minds, that specific type of game is going to, in quote, do well. So I think that with the game that Warner Bros. Montreal was given the mandate to make, this is what they could come up with a formula that seemed to be financially successful at the time when PUBG and Fortnite and all of these other monetizable platforms were really, really raking in the cash. And then Marvel Avengers was the first to actually test it out on the superhero platform, and that bombed like crazy. And Gotham Knights had to basically draw what it could from both sides in order to maybe get the bosses to check market and at the same time not have a situation where the fans utterly reject the game. So to me, the game seems like it's in a very halfway point. Because if you look at the themes, it wants to adopt some sort of a dark theme that's reminiscent of, say, the Batman games. Batman is a character that's designed in a dark world. There's nothing flashy or flamboyant about it. And then you look at some of the other aspects, there's a little bit of flash and flamboyance to it, which is why a lot of people are very, very torn about Red Hood and all of the above. Me, I'm not really worried about that because I think someone else is going to do a very cool representation of Red Hood. I mean, Ed Boon right now is teasing a Marvel DC video game, which he may have slipped up on a while ago and possibly is there. And NetherRealm still has one of the better representations of Red Hood. And if you watch the character being played on a professional level, man, it is the best thing that you've seen, even though their animations may not necessarily be, the top notch when it comes to fighting games in Injustice 2. And so this is the reason why my hype for Gotham Knights never really did extend way past where it is. I think as somebody who has studied the way video game development companies work, it is very interesting to, see the way it's going. Now, this is not in terms of just free flow or just comparing Arkham or whatever it is or saying Gotham Knights is. I know all of these talking points. I've argued for them and even against them over time. I'm just saying that this is the reason why I never got overly excited for a game like that, and why I'm looking forward to, say, possibly a game like Wonder Woman, Wolverine. Oh my gosh, Wolverine. I haven't seen anything about Wolverine, but if Insomniac follows with that winning formula, they're going to easily outclass any other superhero game out there. Even if it's going to be an exclusive, Wolverine is a very solid character. One of my favorite characters overall. I mean, look at my channel art. You will see that. And so this is a very interesting aspect of the conversation. Now, I know that there are even other people in the community that actually feel that way. We just want to give Gotham Knights the best, appreciation that we possibly can. And I think this has been, even in a sense, good that I can do so and be as objective as I possibly can. So I'm not overly hyped, so I'm not balanced. I'm not biased in a way. I'm trying to be balanced, or I'm not overly disappointed, so I'm not also tilted in the negative for the game. So that's actually pretty cool. And again, what made me even develop more of an appreciation for the game as well was the developers have taken the initiative to reveal as much as possible as they want to for the game. So now we know almost exactly what it is we're getting. In fact, I even considered pre-ordering a second copy just because they were transparent. This is something I have never done. Even for games that I've been super hyped about, I only get my one copy. But this game has been so transparent and I respect it. That's a big deal for me personally. I'm not saying go buy 2 copies. I'm not even saying buy any. Don't buy anything, guys. Do not touch this game if you're not sure. If you are certain, nonetheless, join me. Let's get into this. Let's see what this game is about. And we're going to appreciate the parts that we think are great, and the parts that are not as great, if we find them, we're going to critique them in order that the developers implement this for whatever future projects that they have. I want them to win. I've always been in that category because Marvel Spider-Man basically came and copied my favorite superheroes formula and is winning, and Spider-Man fans would not let me hear anything else other than Spider-Man's the greatest game. I'm like, yeah. No, it's not. You literally took, a lot of notes from us, but it's fine. I'm not, bitter about it. Am I not? I shouldn't be. If I guess I should. Let me word my sentences properly. Let me be honest with you. There's not bitterness, but there's a little bit of that salt. I'm kind of salty, slightly, tilted a little bit, like that everyone else is winning using this formula, but other teams within these ranks, or another team within this ranks was possibly not allowed to use that formula with their other games that got canceled. I strongly believe that their other games that were canceled would have probably followed this formula as well. But again, execs wanting things that they possibly can't get because they're kind of jaded in a sense. I mean, think about the executives that ran Warner Brothers for the past few years before we got this new management. Think about the decisions that they've made. I see Gotham Knights basically coming from some office upstairs. I think that's the case. I don't think it's all WB Montreal and their decision makers. I mean, CNN Plus, $300 million. Goodness gracious. Thanks for watching the video. We'll talk very soon. Peace out.